everybody out there in TV land. Welcome to another episode of syllaBLISS or syllaBUST. That's right. Where Fake Professor comes to you with his now 18 years of college teaching experience, takes a look at college syllabi from across the country to let students know if they should expect a blissful experience in that class or if they should expect a straight up bust. That's right. And yesterday we did our very first episode. It was really exciting and we covered Cornell. And I was really excited to come across an amazing syllabus for our very first episode. It really was a blissful syllabus, and students in that class, are really lucky and can, really probably should expect to have a really good experience. And we decided to focus, that's the royal we, I decided to focus on, at least for these initial episodes, intro to psychology. Why? Because just about every college student has some experience with intro to psychology. These are generally massive classes. A lot of times it's a requirement for students' majors. And then a lot of times students just take it because it's an extremely interesting and informative class. So just about everybody has experience with introduction to psychology. It really is one of the quintessential American higher ed experience courses. It just is. I really can't think of many courses that are kind of just a more general college experience than that class. So those are the syllabi that we are focusing on right now. So yesterday we did Cornell, and today I came across, and again, we're only doing stuff that's in the public domain, right? I came across the syllabus at another fancy university. Like to start out with the fancy universities. Why not, right? They're the universities that get all the attention. They get all the media coverage. And again, for good reason, because they really sort of set the cultural standard for other colleges and universities in the United States. So yesterday, Cornell, today, John Hopkins University. Their intro to psych course, the syllabus is up for fall 2025. What do you say? Let's get into it to see if students should expect to have a blissful experience or perhaps a straight up fucking bust. Now again, folks, it's all in fun. Or is it? I'm pretty sure it is. And I always got to start out with a disclaimer that we are not here to pick on any individuals. Teaching college, especially today, is a very challenging gig. So this is all in fun. I think it's all in fun. Hope you get a little bit out of this. So let's get into it for today. John Hopkins, their intro to psych, general psych course, syllaBLISS or syllaBUST. Okay. Are you ready for it? I think you're ready for it. I am ready. Okay, folks, here we go. Coming out of the gate. Introduction to Psychology, fall 2025. The only introductory course where you are the subject. Okay, that's interesting. All right, don't hate it, right? Kind of, starting out with a little intrigue, if you will, right? Trying to get students sort of intrigued about what's going on. I like it. I don't hate it. The psychologist finds himself in the midst of a rich and vast land. Okay, now it is fall 2025. Yes, it is fall 2025. And while I think it is fair to say that the let's say sort of linguistic expectations of the of being in a college campus over the last 5 years have certainly changed quite a bit, and let's say have started to even change back quite a bit. Um, I think coming right out of the gate with a clearly gendered term, I think that that is going to kind of not set up the environment that these professors are looking for. Not that this is necessarily problematic in any way, but it is 2025. You do have to understand your audience. Yes, you do. And this is not a good sign. This is not a sign that these individuals understand the audience that they are working with in modern times. But let's see, who knows? Let's go past the introductory quote. Of course, this is an old quote, I assume. And back in the days, it was much more common to use much more gendered language. So a lot of times you can get away with that, um, or not. Maybe it's not a quote. There are men killing themselves, a child playing, a child forming his lips, trying to say his first word. A person who, having fallen in love and been caught in an unhappy situation, is not willing or not able to find a way out. There's the mystical state called hypnosis. There is the reaching out for higher and more difficult goals, planning, exploring. It is an immense continent full of fascination and power. What the heck is this? Psychology is out to conquer this continent, to find out where its treasures are hidden, to investigate its danger spots, to master its vast forces, and to utilize its energies. I'm sorry, I have no fucking idea what this is doing here. Is this a quote? Is this from the authors? This is freaking me out. This is not a good sign. If you're going to have a famous quote to start out, that's okay. If you are going to talk like you are a poet, that is not a good sign. No, it is not. I'm sorry. This has bust written all over. But let's give it a chance here. We really just started out, but this is not a good sign, folks. Okay. They got a big hyperlink there. Okay. Interesting. Okay, again, we don't focus on the individuals, right? It's nothing to do with the individuals. This is all just about style. Lots of colleges, lots of approaches. Let's take a look at it. Instructor, teaching assistants, right? Again, this is all in the public domain. This is all publicly available online. Okay, so let's take a look first at the very first thing they want their readers to see. Because, of course, you got to have your contact information right out of the gate. But then, very much like a menu at a restaurant, you are trying to get your customers to pay attention to the high ticket items, the high value items, the drinks, the appetizers, and the desserts, right? Because this is where you make your money as a server. This is where you make your money as a restaurant, right? These are the high profit margin items. So putting those items sort of front and center for people to see is a perceptual technique to attract their attention to the things that we want them to be purchasing. This is an example of that important email, very first page of the syllabus. There is an important note, and it's about email. Let's take a look at it. We do not yet have, I like that, an intro to psych Snapchat account. Oh boy. Snapchat account coming right out the gate with a social media Snapchat account. We do not yet have that. That's not a good sign that we're even talking about Snapchat on the first page of the syllabus. Oh boy. However, there are almost 500 of you little worker ants out there. There's a lot of you in this hive. Yes, there are. And only 5 queen and king motherfucking ants. I'm sorry. There's a lot of us. There's only a couple of us. We're special. There's a lot of you. You, as a student, you got to recognize that our life is tough. For this reason and this reason alone, We have a system in place to make our digital correspondence manageable. And that crack system, this sophisticated system, is when you send us an email, please put intro 25 in the subject. Now, I got to be honest with you, folks. I have, every single professor has been doing something like this really for the last probably 15 or 20 years. Anybody who teaches multiple courses or has big courses knows that you're going to get emails from students that just say, "Hey, I'm in your class. Can you tell me about this?" And you're going to think to yourself, "Hey, what class are you talking about?" Sometimes you can tell, obviously, by the nature of the question, but a lot of times you cannot. They might be asking, like, "Hey, when is the exam for this class?" Well, then you have to get the email and respond, "What class are you talking about?" And then they have to get the email and respond, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm talking about this class." So to remove those intermediate emails, if you just tell me what class you're talking about, then I can give you an answer more quickly. That certainly is the case. I always have those on my syllabus, but I got to say, putting that front and center with the appetizers, this is what is most important to us. This is not a good sign, folks. Why is this not a good sign? This is a sign that instead of maybe, let's say, like the syllabus that we saw yesterday, which really wanted to kind of set the energy for the class of this class is about being inquisitive. This class is about being curious. Right out of the gate, we can see this class is about crowd control. That is right. You are one of the peanuts in the peanut gallery, and we need to control the masses. And so we are talking to you. There's 500 of you, like one of the masses. And that is now going to orient the brains of those students because they're human beings to start thinking, oh, I'm no longer an individual participating in this class. I am simply one of the masses. And I can now act accordingly because that is how they are seeing me. Let's keep going. Sure are a lot of TAs here, but it is a huge, huge class. So probably not nearly enough TAs. And in fact, that looks to be the case. Okay, so let's take a look at the reading. The required textbook, and you can see we have some textbook information here. Okay, they have a textbook. It is available online and through the campus bookstore. And it is very good. The best textbook I have seen. Okay. So right out of the gate, we know that, I guess as a student, you kind of assume that if your professor, your instructor is assigning a textbook, that it is the best textbook that they know of. You probably wouldn't assume that they would assign you a textbook that is not as good as another one that they have seen, unless it was a matter of cost. So, is that the case here? But it is also expensive. I'm sorry. So, they are basically giving you the most expensive textbook. And that sucks. All right, folks, here you go. This is a big flashing red light in a syllabus. I get it. I've been teaching college for almost 2 decades, and my style was always very conversational, and I used humor because that was just one of my skills, or I should say, that was the way I dealt with things so that I would not have an ongoing panic attack all the time standing up in front of hundreds of people. That was how I dealt with, um, my anxiety. But one of the things that you, I think, learn early on is that it's really easy to get laughs or smiles or people thinking that you're cool if you swear or you talk about, kind of things that maybe are not age appropriate, like drugs and alcohol or things like that. Or you say things like college sucks, things like that. You kind of use language to suggest, like, hey, I'm one of you. I'm down with the youth. I know what's up. And you will find some immediate sort of positive reinforcement. Hey, this professor is cool. He's down. He's one of the cool ones. But over time, you will realize that that is not the same thing as respect. And ultimately, your students want to respect you as a professional. They do not want you to be one of their buddies. They might like it because they are at that age, but as they matriculate through, they will very quickly figure out that that was not what they really needed from their instructor. So when I see evidence that someone's trying to tell students, especially hundreds of students, hey, I'm cool, I'm down, that is not a good sign. College is pricey enough as it is. Of course, your students know that going to one of the most expensive schools in the country. Um, the good news is that as the textbook has become more popular, there are more and more used copies available for a steep discount. I've seen it as low as $10. What you are also saying is one of the reasons why there are more and more used copies is because the textbook is older and older. That's right. You can get right. The science changes very frequently. Imagine this, like there's even this thing called AI, which is going to radically transform the science altogether. But you can get a textbook from 5 years ago for $10. This, again, is a very bad sign. And I'm not being critical because we all do this. Fake professor acknowledges that I have done this many times throughout my career. You find a textbook you like. That's just the way it is. You build a course around it. You get the course in a way you like it, that it works, that's effective for students. And then you just got to deal with the fact that the textbooks start to get updated. And, are you going to start to kind of redo it again? And that's the sort of push and pull. And, for some courses like statistics or other things like that, the textbook doesn't ever really change, right? You can get a stats book from 50 years ago and it's still, going to cover the stats that you're doing today. But an intro to psychology textbook from 10 years ago is not going to cover what you need today, let alone, I don't know, 5 years ago. Who knows? So you got to be weary about that. That is, again, not a very good sign. Okay, very nice. Where possible, we will forego the textbook for other sources, including primary readings from the leading scientific journals such as Nature and Science. Where possible. Okay. This is a very challenging thing to do to students because you are simultaneously telling students there is a textbook and it is an expensive textbook. And then you are also telling them that you're going to try not to use the textbook when you can. You're going to try to use, let's say, like publications that they have access to through the library. And again, all of us have done this. If you don't have a textbook, it doesn't feel right. A lot of students are very uncomfortable with that. You just kind of lose that familiarity, that familiar structure. That can go both ways. If you go with the total open source textbook, I mean, you just really have to be on your P's and Q's. And we saw that in the previous semester, and that class looked effing awesome. It really did. They had a free textbook. Everything was new. I've been seeing people use AI to kind of put the textbook together for free. These are the things I'm just telling you that students in 2025 and 2026 are going to expect, and they should. So this is just setting up a very confusing sort of expectation for students preparing for material, what to invest in. Uh, At least once, there will be an interactive game to play before class. Again, at least once. And again, you're kind of setting up the expectation that, this course is not as structured as you might expect for 500 students. Sometimes this might happen. Sometimes that might happen. Yeah, some people use that as a strategy to kind of keep students uncomfortable and showing up to class. But that's really kind of an old school strategy that I think most people now recognize does not work effectively. But anyway, that's just my opinion. But sometimes the textbook really is the best source of information about a topic. And so you should expect a mix of readings throughout the semester. That's just very confusing as a student. A lot of sometimes, a lot of occasionally, a lot of, when we can. Okay. Each class will consist of a lecture. And again, usually by, again, Professor so and so. Again, those usually sometimes that can be confusing, right? It really, makes things hard to kind of plan and expect. You want to be there for that professor's lectures, especially if you like them, but occasionally there will be a special guest. Are we going to know about these special guests ahead of time? Is there going to be a special guest when that professor, doesn't want to show up? Are they going to get one of their colleagues and we're going to call them a special guest? When somebody is sick or out with COVID, are they going to get one of their fancy friends? Are we going to call them a special guest, or are there actually special guests planned already? The lectures may not perfectly follow the readings. Again, this is just very confusing language. And as scientists, we're used to using hedge words. And so when we're making claims about causality, this is very good language. But when we're telling 500 students about a foundational course and we're saying, this might happen, this occasionally will happen, that's a lot of crowd control you're going to have to deal with. Oh, check out what they have highlighted. The single best secret to succeeding in this course is to attend all the lectures and do all the readings. I'm sorry, folks. This is just not looking good here at all. What a pedantic fucking statement, right? Talking to a student. That's like saying the best way to be healthy is to, eat the best food and exercise and get 8 hours of sleep and not be stressed out whatsoever and have good genes. That is the best way to live a long life and be healthy. Holy cow. You are telling college students at an elite university that the secret to doing well in this class is to come to class and do the readings. Oh boy. I know we used to talk to people like that 30 years ago. I don't think that flies anymore. No, I do not. Here we go. Okay. There will be copies of the lecture slides available online after class and sometimes before. Again, more the sometimes. But they will not contain very much text and are no substitute for attending. Again, I totally understand this. I've done things like this, but never this amount of uncertainty. Indeed, since psychology is the study of our own minds, I mean, that's one of the aspects of psychology. It's also the study of our behavior. Lectures will almost always involve some interactive dynamic component that you simply cannot experience or understand by reviewing the slides alone. You would never understand. You just wouldn't get it. You're just not smart enough. If you don't come to class, let's just be honest, what I'm giving you, nobody else can give you. You just won't understand. Oh, I get it. Again, I'm giving this syllabus a hard time because I just really think that this is the approach that really turns off students right out of the gate. You're talking to them like they're not an individual, like they're just part of the masses, one of the 500, and we're these special five. Right out of the gate, you are telling them things like the best way to do well in this class is to do the work, talking to them like they're children, and then just kind of just saying overly generalized, fluffy statements, trying to sound like you're their buddy, but then having all sorts of kind of hedge words where you're not really sure if this is going to happen or if you're going to use this. This seems like somebody who's trying to do a good job, is trying to relate to the students, is trying to say, hey, it's going to be okay. I promise. Trust me. But right now, the way they're setting things up, it's a little bit difficult to trust. I'm not going to lie. Requirements and evaluation. Wow. Exams. Okay. This is a very exam heavy class. And I get that. I think that is definitely an effective style, especially for 500 students. If you have 500 students and only 5 TAs, you pretty much got to do multiple choice. There's just no other way. There's just way too many tests to grade and just not enough human power. It's just a fact of the reality. There will be 3 midterms exams worth 30%, 30%, and 15% of your final grade, with your lowest scoring exam counting for the fewest points. Okay, I like that. This is an approach we saw. In the previous syllabus, they had weekly quizzes, and they dropped the two. I think they dropped some of the lowest quizzes. That's one way to do it when you have lots of evaluation. When you have less evaluation, you can't really drop a midterm. So this is one way to kind of reduce the harm, if you will, of the test that you performed the poorest on. I like that. I think that's an interesting approach. Um, each exam will consist of multiple choice questions. In some ways, this is not ideal. Okay, that this is terrible. You are self-handicapping here right out of the gate. This is like going on a first date and just not taking a shower. Pretty much is what you're doing here, right? This is having a big exam the night before, the next morning, and going out and getting hammered. This is just someone telling them I am not confident in what I'm doing here. The way I've set my course up is not ideal. Now, even if you believe that, and obviously this individual believes that, this is not what you want to tell 500 students. You want to do everything you can to make that the best class, given the non-ideal circumstances that we're all operating in. This is a very bad sign. Since short answer questions would allow more variety in the questions we ask and the answers you give at the same time, however, those kinds of questions open the door to subjectivity in grading, which we may learn a bit about in our class. So we'll try to make the questions interesting and thoughtful while also avoiding unfair trick questions. Here you go, folks. These are all just really bad signs. This is somebody who's read their course evaluations and seen what a few students didn't like about their courses and is now, trying to essentially stop that from happening again by putting it in their syllabus. All of the various anecdotes of situations that didn't go well, that somebody complained about, and they think that if they put it in the syllabus, that they're not going to get that complaint again, when in reality, what you're doing is priming students to think about that. You have now primed 500 students to think that you are teaching a non-ideal course. You are also just now primed 500 students to think that that open-ended questions would be better, but you don't want to fucking argue with them about what they believe to be the subjectively correct answer. That you believe that everything is so relative and subjective that you cannot even write a test about a science without being able to tell a student, no, that is not correct. This is the correct answer. Woo. So not only all the self-handicapping, but all the priming about how this is a bad course and how the evaluation is not going to be good, and that you essentially don't want to evaluate them a more effective way because you don't want to argue with them. That is not good. That just shows someone who is not confident and wants out. The exams are not cumulative. And notice they're really emphasizing not, because someone complained about that, meaning that each exam will cover the course material since the previous exam. I generally do things this way. I like it that way. But again, there's totally reasonable to do it different ways. But the exams are cumulative in the sense that later exams may rely on concepts introduced earlier in the semester. Now, this is in there for a particular reason, because they once told students that the exams are not cumulative. And then there was a question that actually was from a previous lesson, and that student complained. And then that professor, was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because they had put in their syllabus that they were not cumulative, and they had to give those students that questions. That has happened to me. Yes, it has. You got to be really explicit when you say things like that. And if you say it's not cumulative and there is a question that is from an earlier section and they come to you and they say, I'm going to go to the dean and I'm going to complain, well, you're going to have to do something about it. So this is their attempt to do something about it. This is what happens when professors get caught up in responding to all the criticism that they've received on ratemindprofessor.com or on their evaluations. And that is not good. This is not a good sign. Oh, they're even giving examples. Oh boy, when you start getting examples, that's really bad. How can you succeed on the exams? Again, the secret to success is to attend other lectures and do all the reading. That is the second time that these individuals have spoken to these very esteemed and very accomplished college students like they were babies. That really sucks. Okay. Exam scores as a function of class attendance. You know what this reminds me of? This kind of reminds me of a pack of cigarettes that says smoking will cause cancer. And they believe, you know what? Maybe what we got to do is put a picture of a cancerous lung like they do, like overseas on the pack, right? So we've put on the pack smoking causes cancer. And now we're going to show you a graph of it. If the two bolded statements of talking to you like a child wasn't enough to convince you to come to the class, you're just one of the 500, then maybe an extremely rudimentary graph made on Excel that I just made up will, right? How do you actually know this information? Gee, holy cow. This has got bust written all over it. This is not good at all, folks. Okay, reading response. Ooh, participation. Now you really know. Here's where things show it. 10% is a massive amount of points to give for participation, but this reflects just how crucial participation is to succeeding this course. We will use the iClicker system, which you can read up about. Okay. I'm not going to get into this. Some professors do use those eye clickers. Some students really like them. And if you're going to use this as your participation, this is a way to force students to come to class. And this is a way to force students to participate without having, a student to raise their hand in a sea of 1,000 eyeballs, because obviously that would be impossible and psychotic. And you would have lots of students passing out and seizing, and you don't want to deal with that. But I actually think that this is a pretty good strategy. So we finally come across something that I think, again, when you're dealing with a class of this size, if you really, really want to make your students come to class, showing them a graph isn't going to do it. And putting two bold statements isn't going to do it. But using eye clickers and making their participation in class lectures part of the grade certainly will. So this is an effective strategy to get people to come to class. Now, students will stand outside the lecture hall with their eye clicker and just click it and then move on about their day if it's just based on attendance. But if they have to answer questions, then they, or at least their hired butler, is going to have to go to that class and do it. And this is a really good service that a student could start. Eye clicker butler service. You heard it here first. I get 5%. All right, your final grade. Look at that long statement of final grades. We will be borrowing a brilliant grading system. Oh, okay. They're calling their own grading system brilliant, just like the holy cow. Oh, my Lord. They're referring to their own. What do I even need to say anything? Okay, let's keep going here. Brilliant, brilliant grading system developed by a different professor, which ensures that an A is available to every single student. That doesn't require a brilliant grading system, and indeed, it's possible for the entire class to earn an A. Many students will certainly get an A. There are protections against both grade inflation and deflation, and nobody is in competition with one another. The top 5% of scores earn an A plus. The next best scores become the upper benchmark. Blah 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 blah. Again, here now is a overcomplicated, over sophisticated attempt to resolve a problem that doesn't exist. This is what happens when somebody gets caught up. And again, responding to the critiques of a few students when you have thousands and thousands of students that you have to teach. This shows somebody who's not confident, doesn't want to argue with students, is tired of arguing with students, is scared of arguing with students. And I don't blame them whatsoever. Let me tell you, in 2025, students will argue with you in ways that they never would before, and it is much scarier than it was before. So I get it. As a way to kind of avoid that, I think they just need to be a little bit more savvy and not make it so obvious that that is what they're doing. But if you are a student, you're going to look at this final grading thing, and all it's going to do is confuse you more. That's all it's going to do, is confuse you more. You're going to have no fucking idea what it's going to take to get an A, which you want. It's just way too long and confusing. Everything is just confusing. extra credit. Look how low you can earn up to 2% extra credit. Then I see a 0.5%. Again, it is almost a third of a page just trying to describe their genius extra credit. Nobody's going to understand this. It is super. We do see something bold. If you want extra credit, start early. What? Start reading the syllabus early? I think most students should expect to be done with the syllabus by week 8. I'm done with this. Holy cow. Look at this stuff about they're just going and going. As a student at this point, my eyes have glossed over. I am freaked out. I really have no idea what is going on in this course. I don't know how to get an A. I don't exactly know who's going to be lecturing. I know that the professor does not think the course is set up well or that the evaluation is any good. And we are now on page 8 and it is still going. And we finally got to some stuff that's probably relevant to students, disability services, makeup policy, and academic honesty. Oh boy, classroom climate. I got a sense this is not going to be good. Let's take a look. Everyone should be treated with dignity. Absolutely. And respect in the classroom. Well said. This not only means your instructor is treating you with respect, but also you treating each other that way. Psychology is the study of our own minds. Stop saying that, including aspects of our minds that are not always comfortable to consider. Please approach topics with maturity and sensitivity. I see. Oh yeah, they're going to talk about mental illness. That's cool. I think that's nice. Good for them. It's kind of like, hey, don't be an asshole. I think that's totally reasonable to say, like, we're going to be talking about drugs. We're going to be talking about mental illness. We're going to be talking about gender. We're going to be talking about things that people have strong opinions about. For the last couple of years, we've been raging assholes with people that we disagree with. Let's try not to do that this semester. Oh boy. Professor Firestone, what should I call you? Now, this entire thing could be dealt with on the very first day or in an email saying, please refer to me as this. But the very fact that they are now going to spend what looks like a half a page going through their whole sort of mental rationale, trying to relate to you, trying to be funny, again, shows somebody that just does not have their stuff together, is focused on the wrong things. Maybe things are a little bit too special. And maybe think students are a little bit too stupid. I don't know. I'm not typically one to insist on titles, and most people in my life call me Chaz. As you'll see, I sign emails this way, but I think Professor Firestone is a more appropriate way to address me when we are interacting. Some very important research shows that female professors do not have their credentials taken as seriously as male professors. Okay, I don't want to get into that. I do think Dr. Firestone sounds a bit weird, and that you can just say that. Just say that. Please call me Professor this. That's all you got to do. And your students will call you Professor that. And they don't have to know what you think is weird or anything else. All right. What can I say, folks? What can I say, folks? For our very first episode, I gotta say, we had a syllabus that was like a dream intro to psych class. It was inquisitive. It was not threatening. The textbook was modern and free. It had weekly quizzes where students could use their book, but it also had a cumulative exam at the end. So students had to do both. The professor had a podcast, which was really cool. But the main thing was that all of the language was talking to these students like they were adults and setting up an environment where adults operate. Unfortunately, for this syllabus that we looked at today, it really was a pretty good example of the opposite. Coming right out of the gate. And again, and I understand, and I really do understand. That's why we're kind of covering the same class across these universities. These are big classes. They're very challenging courses to teach. I have taught this course, hundreds and hundreds of students. It is a lot of crowd control. It takes a special person, it really does, to teach a class of this size. With all that said, you still have to set up an environment where students feel like adults, feel respected, and feel like they are put in a situation where they're being treated like adults and that you're not trying to be their buddy. You're not trying to relate to them. Yes, you are empathetic and sympathetic about the obstacles they're dealing with, how hard college is, all of those things. But you recognize your role and the importance of maintaining that role and not sort of crossing into, hey, I'm cool. Check this out. Because again, at the beginning, that feels really good. You will get some positive feedback, but you will notice that students ultimately do not respect that. And anytime you see a syllabus and it is one this long, but it is full of anecdotes about situations that went wrong before, and that professor thinks that by, talking about each one of those anecdotes, sort of like, kind of, cover, the whack-a-mole thing, that they're finally going to get that mole. All they're going to do is let students know that they play whack-a-mole. And they are setting up an environment to let them know that that's what the environment is. So you better get to moling. You better get to popping up because that's what we do here. So I'm really sorry. I think this class is likely to be a bust. I'm really sorry. You never know. Maybe the professor is just awesome. Maybe they have an awesome personality. And a lot of times the syllabus doesn't actually reflect, but based on my experience, based on what I've seen, I'm sorry. Number 2, John Hopkins, Intro to Psych, syllabus. All right. Hope you all enjoyed that. Nice to see you. We will see you next time for our next episode. Peace.